Welcome, Noel. It's great to see you on the podcast. We had a great conversation. I think it was a couple of weeks ago now, so it's lovely to have you here for the conversation.
Well, thank you so much, Josephine. I am really pleased to be here with you and your listeners today on your podcast, Teams, Culture, and You. I
Great.
see that you have a fabulous audience and a very wide range of topics that you cover on teams and culture and development. And it's exactly the type of thing that I'm interested in the conversation on.
Yeah, fantastic. And, Noel, I was really keen to have you on. You've got an incredible background. You've had this really long career at UPS. You were the vice president of operations for UPS, and you've
Yes.
recently written a book, which is Congrats, You've Been Promoted, an essential guide for helping new leaders and their teams succeed. So we're going to talk about all of those things. But before we do that incredible career of yours, tell me a little bit about perhaps the major milestones for you that led you to where you are today.
Well, that's a tough one. I think when you say major milestones, the one thing that I had as a focus in my entire career, and this really started quite early for me when I was a college student, getting my engineering degree, and I was working part-time at UPS. And as I was graduating from college, looking to become an engineer, I had offers from some tech companies, but I really loved what I was doing at UPS in a leadership capacity. At the time, I was a college student, but I was in a leadership capacity in a distribution center. And so when they offered me a position in 1980 to stay with the organization, I gladly accepted. So when you talk about milestones, I think that was the first one, right? Is a decision that I spent 4 years studying electrical engineering. Yet I chose to go to walk a path as a supervisor in a leadership capacity at the early age of 20.
Mm.
And then my career moved on from there. But I guess to answer your question a little more directly is I only ever had one focus in my career, and that was to be as good a leader as I could be. And I always looked at who was considered the best leader in the group, right? That was very consistent for me. When I was 20, I wanted to know in that period of my life who was considered the best 20-year-old supervisor at the time. And it was a guy named Bob Kuchenmeister. I can still remember his name. And
Sorry for
he was
saying.
20 and he was considered the best leader of, because there was a group of us, about 18 of us as supervisors, and he was considered the best. And so I paid attention to his style of leadership, which continued for me throughout when I became a manager in 1984. And it wasn't to compete with them; it was to learn from them.
Mm,
And that's an important distinction. Is
absolutely.
that I've always had a learning mindset, and mentorship is important. And I was fortunate in my life, not just in my UPS life, to have great mentors. And I'm a strong advocate that people should have mentors. And I think they should actually have mentors that don't look like them, and
Right.
don't come from where they come from, because
Yeah.
you already know what that is, right? So learn from people that don't necessarily share in the same space that you came from.
Now, can I just ask you that early drive to be a leader, where does that come from for you?
I think probably my family would be foundationally accredited for that. My grandfather, who was my role model, my father's father, because I'm going to say, just for your listeners, that my dad was late to the dance. He was not a very supportive person, but his father recognized it. And my brother, I have a brother who's 2 years older than I am. He was very protective of us. He was a barber, and he had a barber shop, and he would let us sweep hair in the barber shop on weekends when we were young, like 7 and 8 years old. Right. So we learned a lot of lessons in the barber shop.
Yes,
But
I
my
can imagine.
grandfather was a very stoic person. He was a man of very few words. I never saw him get angry once, but he always had an environment in his barber shop that was amenable for his customers, right? And he had a sign, "My shop, my rules." And his number one rules was respect others. That was his number one rule: respect others, right? So I'm like 7, and I'm seeing this until I swept hair in that barbershop pretty regularly until I was like 13. Then I went into sports, and so I wasn't as often there. But I learned from him probably the most. And
Mm.
so my leadership DNA, if you will, it probably comes more from him and the influence he had on me early than any other place.
Isn't that wonderful? I love the role that grandparents play. It's so important, isn't it? And
They're
also,
critical.
siblings, brothers, but I can imagine that barbershop environment because there's so many different types of people that come into that environment. And so
Yes, no doubt.
what you were seeing was someone being able to create an environment where everyone can come in and feel that respect and feel safe, I guess. I don't want
Sure.
to, yeah.
I would see, and the other thing that's important about that for me from a value driven perspective is you see everything, right? Customers will be talking about sports and get into it or whatever it was. But there was one occasion, it's in my book actually, where in the chapter I wrote on ethics, the first lesson I ever learned on ethics, I was like 8 years old. I remember like yesterday though. And one guy was talking to another in the barbershop, and he was laughing, the two of them, about how he dodged a bullet, had sold his car, was a Buick. And he said, I got $3,000 for that car. And he was laughing with the other guy, and he goes, and the engine, my mechanic says, it's going to go out like 2 months. I dodged a bullet. And my grandfather overheard that conversation. And I'm sweeping hair, and he stops and he goes, what comes around goes around. And right is right and wrong is wrong. And my grandfather was a very ethical man. And the point in the book, I say, just because something's legal, and this is something I used in my career as I became a president, just because something's legal doesn't make it ethical, right? That ethics matter. And when you have a void of ethics, whether it's your company, personally, whatever, you're just not going to be a successful person for any reason or amount of time. It's just not going to happen.
Yeah, great. That's a great lesson and learned really, really young. But I 100% Noel, I agree with you. I think that, legal systems are one thing, but then ethics is actually, it's a considering all other facets of that issue. So yeah,
Sure.
absolutely.
Yes.
Mm. So then you've got this leadership position in your early 20s, you become a manager in the 30s. You obviously spent a great deal of time at UPS. Tell me a little bit about the UPS environment. Case studies have been written about UPS as an organization, but you've got a first-hand experience.
I was really fortunate. I felt very blessed to have landed on the doorstep of UPS. And here's the reason for that. The reason was the ethos in the organization was value based, right? And it wasn't copybook. It wasn't a cliche. It was a thing. And as a young person, right, what I learned early was based on the principles of the founder of the organization. Makes sense. James E. Casey, who founded UPS when he was 19. Believe it or not, he was 19 in Seattle, Washington, 1907. Irish immigrant. His father took him and his family to Seattle. And I don't know if many people understand the Irish dilemma in America during the turn of the century, but it was a thing. They were highly discriminated against,
No?
something
Yes.
that was embedded in his mind's eye around fairness to people. So when he started his company, it was important that it was principled. It was important that people mattered. And so I happened to land in an organization like that during my formative years of life, right? In my young period. And so the first thing we were taught was the importance of ethics, integrity. Those were just non negotiable, right? Period. Is that we will have integrity in everything we do is very intentional. And intentional leadership is what matters. And so I learned early in my career to lead with intention. I was taught that by my manager, mentors, people I was around to lead with intention. You don't leave it to doubt that we will have integrity in our group. That if there's any question, there's no question. If it's not right, we're not doing it. It's just not even a question. The customer will never be subject to a lack of integrity type issues with our company, even if we need to give them the benefit of the doubt. And our employees, the same thing. When a question, and it was in our policy guidance,
Mm.
it was in black and white. When a question arises, the employee is to get the benefit of the doubt. So if you were a
Right.
manager in a questionable moment and it was plausible what the employee was saying, Okay, your responsibility was to give them the benefit of the doubt. And the reason for that is if they were really dubious in any kind of way, it'd show up again. Okay. You don't have
Yes.
to
Yeah.
worry about an act on once, right? And it was never worth losing your integrity or ethics to deal with that
Hmm.
moment, right? That making people feel that they were valued was number one. And I think the fact that the company grew from a bicycle messenger service in Seattle, Washington, with 7 or 8 messengers to a company
Incredible.
today with 750 aircraft and 450,000 people says all it needs to about the commitment people had to the organization. And I learned in that environment. I was very fortunate.
But not that growth trajectory over, I mean, obviously over a number of years, and there was that legacy of that, the starting or the founder story, which often you see in organizations, but it doesn't always translate to the future. There must have been something quite special, because I know a number of different organizations that have that legacy start, or the founder has that intention. And then by the time the organization is a multinational, they lose that aspect of the founder's intention, I guess. So there must have been something quite special about that cascading or transference of those values, particularly in leadership at UPS. Must have been.
What it was, to give you specificity there, was ownership. Is that I was a partner in the organization at 22 years old, just
Yeah.
like a partner in a law firm. You had skin in the game, right? And if you have skin in the game, and I think all employees should have skin in the game, they really
Yes.
do. They may not always recognize it. That's when commitment changes. Is when the person that is responsible for delivering whatever you're selling, doing, whatever, they need to be able to put that organization's success with their personal success, right?
Yes.
And so there was always an effort to do that. And I would meet with 150 to 200 small business owners a year. Honestly, I'm not embellishing any party that as a president. And I did it for 25 years. And the one thing I would always say to small business owners is you need to create an environment that includes your people. Because here's why. You want to be successful. I don't care if you sell donuts. And people support the ideas they help create. It's a natural law. People support things they create. And I use that many times in my career with UPS employees, where if there was a challenge, including them in solving for that, always got a better outcome than not including them. How about that? Right? That when they're included, and I don't care if they're a delivery driver, when they're included in the solve and in the
Yes.
conversation versus orders just being thrown at them, there was always a better outcome. Because you know what? We cared about the outcome being what was desirable. Who thought it up is irrelevant,
That's right.
right? But the fact of the matter is the people that execute the flesh and bone of any organization are the employees, not the CEO. It's the employees. They're the flesh and bone in the place, right?
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. So Noel, tell me a little bit about, so what happened after that? So how did you break into those executive roles at UPS, the sort of senior leadership roles at UPS? What was that trajectory for you? What was the trajectory like for you?
What happens for a leader as they move through their career is an evaluation of their commitment to that thing they're involved in, right? I talk about this as well. Not that I want to make everything we talk about the book, but the book
Yeah.
is the book, right? And I actually wrote an article for CEOs recently. And the title of the article which is also a section of the book, You're Always Being Evaluated. And I want the leader to understand that another natural event that happens is you're always being evaluated. There is no such thing as a casual moment. Okay, when you look at a business, the people come in, they go to work, right? Show up, then there's this period of the day where they're expected to be a professional, right? Those 8 hours or wherever how many hours they're working, they're
Hmm.
expected to be a professional. And I would communicate it to young supervisors and managers in this way. I'd say, when you see a sports team, pick your favorite one. I don't care what sport it is. When they get on the floor, when they get then it's time to play the game. And I don't mean business is a game, but it's showtime. This is what we do for a living. We are professionals. And the fact of the matter is that when leaders understand that when they walk in front of their people, they're the leader, they're the head coach, they're the leader of the team, right? There's an
100%.
expectation that they
Yes.
have the right values, they're the right role model. Their behavior is always being evaluated. There's no casual moments. There's no casual moments. And in those moments, your people are evaluating everything you do, how you do what you do. And so, having said that, it's important, and it was important for me to, in that way, always. And I focused on development of people more than anything else. What do coaches do? Leadership is coaching. Okay. Leadership is coaching. And the other thing that leadership is the ability to influence someone's behavior. Simply stated, it's no more, no less than that. You're the leader. Why? To influence the team's skill set, to influence how good they are at something. That's what you do. Okay. And there's no casual moments between you and that objective. And so leaders who forget about that
Hmm.
forget what their responsibilities are. And I think early in my career as a manager in my 20s, I understood that because a mentor had me understand that. So I had a mentor who characterized it that way for me. He's like, hey, listen, kid, this is exactly how you said it. When you're in this office and you and I are having a discussion, we're in the locker room. When we walk out that door and you're the manager of 500 people,
Yeah.
okay, you are always being evaluated. Understand that you don't get to have a casual moment with that group that they won't evaluate. Okay,
Mm-mm.
you may think they're not evaluating you, but they are. And words matter. And you need to make sure that the ones you use are appropriate as a leader. And I
Yeah.
always thought about that. And I believe the organization recognized it as
Mm.
I matured over time. And I went from manager in 1984 to what's called a division manager in 1988. I was 30 years old, right, with 1,200 people. And then I became a president before I was 40. And one consistency I would say there was I was cognizant of the responsibility to
Yeah.
develop
Right.
the people, to make them more important than anything else, right?
Mm.
That I had to serve them. I had to work with them. I didn't have a single day in my career as a manager, clearly, where I didn't think about developing someone that worked under me on my team. Not one.
And Noel, tell me a little bit about, I guess sometimes that's easy when times are good. When times are tough and you've got to make some tough decisions, maybe let people go, maybe, do something about contracting the workforce. How did you apply those principles when times are a little bit tough? Did you have experiences like that?
When it was the most important. That's when people were looking to you to lead in a way that made sense. And when you talk about letting people go, I never saw, if there was a downsizing, right? That was an organizational moment. That wasn't an individual job performance issue
Yeah.
or something like that. But whenever it came down to that moment where someone had to be let go, I believe if you've done your job as a leader, they know why they're being let go,
It's
simply
not a
stated.
surprise.
That's right. And one of the things that I talk about a lot is the use of metaphors. I use metaphors, honestly. What's funny is I picked that up from my grandfather when I was young, right? He was a metaphoraholic. Okay. So I naturally grabbed onto that. And so when I became a leader and I wanted to influence someone's behavior, I would use metaphors because I would depersonalize the moment. I'll give you an example of that. If the person was late, then I would use a metaphor that was connected to reliability. And because everyone thinks reliability is important when it's them, right? Like they want everyone to be reliable in their life, to pay them back on time or to show up to leave on time, whatever, right? So now it's even easier. In the last decade, you have the gig economy, right? And so if a person was late, and they could have had a stellar record, but let's say they were late in the last 4 or 5 weeks, right? And I would go over to them and I'd say, like talking to you, I'd say, Josephine, do you ever use Uber? And they would say yes, or DoorDash. You can find something they use. And then I'd say, so what would you do if you called DoorDash and it took them 3 hours to show up and you thought it was 30 minutes and then it happened again and you thought it was 30. What would you do? You know what they say 100% of the time? I'd use someone else or Uber. Like you have called an Uber and it didn't show up and you were late to the airport. What would you do? And they go, call Lyft or I do something else. I go, so, you've been late 5 times in the last 3 weeks. Have a good day. There's no reason to keep talking about it
Yeah.
because I didn't attack the person, but the point was made
Mm.
and it was made in their own head. Right. And I don't care what the topic is. You could throw any topic you want at me. And I'll tell you, over 40 years, I came up with a metaphor for it. So by the time I'm having the Uber discussion, like the 5th time, Josephine kind of knows where this is going. Right.
That's right. I love that. And, I love that approach because, metaphors are, they're stories and we will all resonate with stories. We all remember them. It's a shortcut way of, getting to the point. And to your point, it's not, it doesn't, never feels like an attacking moment. It's more about, helping someone understand your perspective on what their behavior or their impact of their behavior. So I really love that. I really
The one thing that
love it.
I like to say on that note to your listeners is that here's what conflict with your employees will create: more conflict.
Mm.
And you saw that during COVID, where there wasn't a moment you didn't see a group of medical professionals protesting the moment.
Yeah.
Like we don't have PPE, we don't have masks. This was early, right? And they'd be standing in front of hospitals with signs.
Mm-mm.
The point is that when people are objecting to something, they may do it silently or they may do it publicly.
Mm.
Okay. And the fact of the matter is, though, there will be signs for sure that something's not right, that something's not fair. Right. And the fact of the matter is that the leader should always be looking to create an environment where conflict is handled in a way that's disarming so that people don't have to hold signs
Yes.
up when they're upset about something. Right.
Yes. Yeah,
And that's
absolutely.
how the leader should approach, conflict, because conflict, no organization that lives in conflict has a great trajectory. And that's not to say give away things and don't
Uh-uh.
hold people accountable. It's anything but that. Right. But how you approach employees is important to your business. It is important to continuity of improvement in the business.
Yeah.
Right. And that's not copybook. That's not superfluous. That's not a superfluous kind of thing.
Yeah, wonderful. And so, Noel, you wrote a book. Tell me a little bit about where that came from for you. Where was the impetus to write a book? Because I can see that you're a wonderful mentor. You've done a lot of leadership and mentoring throughout your career. But why write a book?
There wasn't a book out there in my mind that dealt with the real truth of leading on the front line. A lot of the books you see today are for CEOs, organizational development, high performing teams. I mean, I've read dozens of books and I'm not knocking books. They're important. That's why I wrote one. But I wrote a book that could help the small business owner or the leader. It doesn't have to be a newly promoted leader, even though that's, what I title on the book. Understand the basic dynamics of having a successful group of people under you. Like, how do you get from A to Z there? And I believe in my career, I demonstrated enough development of people under me to acknowledge that I understand that pretty darn well. And I didn't see any content like that available. And when I was making the decision to move into the next chapter of my life, one of the biggest challenges I had in the last 4 or 5 years were newly promoted people. We had people retiring like crazy. When I retired, it created 9 promotions. Think about that, right? So I leave and they have to
Wow.
promote me, right? They have to replace me. I'm sorry. Someone gets that job. Then you got a cascade all the way down the line.
Yes.
But when it all came down to it, at the very beginning of that process, or at the end, however you want to look at it, is someone that's young, 30 years old, 25, 28 years old, and they just got promoted. Yesterday, they were driving a forklift. And now tomorrow, they're responsible for the 9 forklift drivers. Okay, here's what they know how to do: drive a forklift and be really good at it. Okay, but do they know how to lead 9 forklift drivers? Not so much.
Uh-uh.
Leadership isn't rocket science, but it is a science. And had I known the things that I'm teaching in the book when I was 20, I would have been a lot more successful quicker. And in the book, I talk about the mistakes that I made, because there were a lot of them, especially early, right? I mean, obviously, I hope they became less later, but in the beginning, it's tough when you're 27 and you have an employee 53 and they drive a forklift and you were
Yeah.
driving one next to them and now you're their supervisor. And
Mm-hmm.
then one day they come at you hard and they come at you hot and you're like talking to 2 or 3 other employees and they're intending to undress you in front of your group. How do you put a stop sign up and say, no, that's not going to happen? Okay. But to do it positively and so that a win-win comes out of it. Well, in the book, I teach a skill called the 4x5 method, and it works. And the 4x5 method can de-escalate any moment. It can stop it in its tracks. It can leave the supervisor with a high confidence in handling it, and the employee will comply. Understand, because the technique is what's important. And the 4x5 method talks about how people see things from 4 lenses, potentially. And that when you talk to them, not at them, it should be from a dimension of 5 different levels, potentially, of intensity. And that's what it leans on. And there's
Mm-hmm.
another principle in the book called the BEST principle, right? Be specific, expect the best, stick to the objective, test commitment. And I talk
Mm-hmm.
about each one of those, that acronym, and how that forms a frame around every engagement that a person, and I learned these techniques over 30 years ago, right? So I understand their ability to influence behavior in a leadership environment, but it's really about helping that new leader maintain confidence, because here's what happens. If their confidence goes down, they're going to quit. And oftentimes the people you promoted were your best people,
Exactly.
right?
Yes.
Okay. And you're not going to do very well if you're promoting them and they keep quitting on you,
Yeah.
right? So unless you make an investment in them, which is development, right, then they're not going to get better. And that's important.
I see that a lot where I see really great technical people get promoted, and then what they experience is a lot of stress and overwhelm in that new job. What you're saying, they're promoted, yet they're not supported in the new role. And it's an expectation and assumption that they can lead in that role. And of course, we know there's a capability set that you need, like some of the things you're talking about. And I love that in your book, you've got some really easy tools to remember to apply immediately. But I think it's such a waste of effort and energy to break someone's confidence is really in the opposite extreme end of what you're trying to do when you're saying, "Hey, you got promoted, well done, we
Right.
value you." So
Right.
I think this is really important because I see that a lot, and it's not just the outcome to the people that they are now supervising, it's the personal outcome to them in that stress and overwhelm and lack of confidence.
Yeah, no doubt. You're absolutely right. I've taught seminars recently to a millennial type age group, Gen Z type age group. And I built a master class actually to accompany the book. It's 10 episodes. And I go through essentially the chapters of the book in like a 10 to 12-minute frame on the master class to give more clarity to the how to, right? Hey, great. Let's everybody have integrity. Let's have ethics. Let's be trustful. But the problem becomes, okay, so what does that even mean in my daily actions? Okay. How do I do that? Intentionality is important.
Yes.
And so I talk about the new leader day one, you get promoted. You know, what's the most important thing? Meet all of your people and understand what their terms and conditions are, which is a foundational piece of my book. If you were to read it, you'd see terms and conditions through the whole thing, because I built the book's foundation on the concept of terms and conditions, right? If you buy an app, you have to click a box, terms and conditions. You go to a concert, if you park your car in a lot, terms and conditions. You buy a refrigerator, there's a warranty, terms and conditions. Car, terms and conditions. And actually, that's where the idea emerged for me. I thought about writing this book 10 years ago, but I had an experience where I was talking to a customer service person. And they were like, well, sir, did you read the terms and conditions on page 11? And I was like, well, no, who does that? Right. But then I thought about that, and I was being in leadership, that people have terms and conditions. So what are they? If I were to say to you, Josephine, can you please list 5 important values that you expect to have in any relationship in your life. What are they? And you make a list. And I can almost tell you what would be on the list: respect,
Yes.
trust,
Yes.
right? Listening. Those are the common ones.
Mm-mm.
And so what I tell the new leader is the first thing they should do if they have 10 people is have 10 personal meetings. Set them up immediately. Have coffee with 10 people, schedule it, meet them, say, hey, I'm your new supervisor. I'm really privileged to be in the role. What are your expectations of me to open the door? And then that gives a leader a platform to say, well, my values are we're going to have integrity in everything we do, transparency. Okay, ethics matter. Okay, if it's wrong, we're not doing it. Listening is important. If you think I'm not hearing you, pull me over to the side so I hear you. So if a new leader does that in the very beginning, and they don't have the job for 6 months or a year, assuming thing, it will go fabulously better. They will establish a foundation with their people immediately. And you think about, and finally I'll say it this way. And when I say in the seminar to most people, who's married, who's got a spouse or girlfriend, they raise their hands. And I go, when you met the person's parent, how'd you behave? They put their best foot forward.
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
You'd
And
hope
I say,
so.
okay, who applied for credit recently, a house or a car? They raise their hand. I go, so when you applied for that, were you nervous? And they're like, yeah. Did you do everything you could to get that loan? Absolutely. Okay, well, you know what? You're a new leader, right? You need to behave exactly like you were applying for credit or meeting the parents. You're meeting your team.
Hmm.
Put your best foot forward. Let them know you personally. You will remove a lot of conflict potential later, right? Establish the terms and conditions on the baseline, right? And make them value-based. Fairness, trust, those things germinate from intentionality.
Yeah, absolutely. And I love that, Noel, and particularly in terms of the how to, because we all want those things, or we might say we want those things, but it's the behaviors that get us to those things. And particularly leaders who say they want those things also need to behave in ways that ensure that they're modeling that as well. And I know
Sure.
you really talk about that too.
Correct.
So that modeling is really important. And as you said, there are no casual moments when you're in leadership. You are being watched, and attention flows
Yes.
up the power chain. So if you're in a position of power, or you're a supervisor, or you're a leader, you're going to have people watching you. And there's a responsibility that goes with that. And so I know you really care about responsibility as well. Well, you talk a lot about, I guess, managing and developing the people underneath you. What are your thoughts on navigating the larger organization, because you have peers when you're a leader, and they often can be a cause of frustration, conflict. Do you have any views on that in terms of, sometimes it's called organizational politics, but it's really about influencing across the organization, not just down the organization?
I think people have an affinity, we all do, to gravitate towards individuals that make us feel valued. The one place ego has no place is in an organization that's looking for common outcomes amongst the unit, whether it's I was in the C-suite, right? I mean, I literally was working next to the CEO on a regular basis. I'd known him for 30 years.
Yeah.
But that being said, when we had conversations, the one thing that wasn't a part of that was the ego, right? He leaned on my expertise and my knowledge in the organization, and I had a lot of social currency throughout the organization that he could leverage, and his staff. Likewise, I made sure that they understood I was there to assist them in their objectives. But that was the style of leadership I had even as a president in the business unit. When I had 30,000 employees under me and a senior staff, I had a CIO and a CFO and a director of human resources, a director of engineering. And so you're going to have disruption sometimes. But the worst thing you can do is ignore it and think it's going to work out. That's the wrong answer. That's the wrong answer. The point is when those moments arise, you need to, as a leader, address them and make sure that it doesn't go unsaid or untouched. But your people are going to look at you primarily.
Mm.
That's how that's going to work. If you're a team focused, team based, collaborative individual, that's what they're going to turn into. If you're not, and you're an order giver and a teller and a yeller, then you're going to create an environment of order givers, tellers, and yellers. That's how that's going to work. Okay. And they're just going to cascade that down into your organization. That's how it works, right? You get what you create. And leaders that come in and start looking at reports first don't get it because results come from people, not reports.
Yeah.
That's just real. I mean, you can use a report to tell you where opportunities to get better are, but you're not going to solve anything looking at numbers. You're going to solve things when people have a common objective around those numbers. And those numbers are only used to talk about opportunities to get better. And it's really important that whoever's going to execute that stuff is in constant conversation, whether it's a round table. I had town halls all the time with union-based employees, Teamsters. Listen, I did. I would stand in front of a group of 200 Teamster union drivers and talk about the organization, where we're headed, blah, blah, blah. But the one thing I never left to chance was how they mattered. And when I ended a discussion, and I did it dozens of times all throughout the U.S., I would end the discussion with 200, 250 employees with me at a podium and think about it in a distribution. And I would say this, and I'd say to the group, right? And I'd say, hey, I'm going to ask you a question, and I'd like a group answer to this question. I said, so how often should you do the right thing? And then if they thought about it for a minute, I go, no, how often should you do the right thing? And then there'd always be some people that would say all the time. And I'd say it again. How often should you do the right thing? And they would say all the time. Well, that holds everyone accountable. Because if I'm asking that, they know they can expect that of me too, right?
Yeah.
And when leaders run an organization where we're going to do the right thing all the time, right? Meaning we're going to have honorable behavior all the time. Okay, then everything else will fall into place. Just understand. I've had business units that were at the bottom of the chart, the rankings, right? That moved up into the top 5. And it wasn't me that did it. It was the employees who did it. When they believed that we were going to support them, to do the right thing all the time, right? Provide great service, get the job done, whatever it took. This is how we eat. It's how we make a living. And I would say that literally to when I was at the pub, like, hey, listen, nothing about this is about anything other than this is how we eat. This is how we make a living. All of us, you and me, okay? We have that incongruence, okay? So if this wheel works, it works for everybody, okay? So whatever I can do to help it work for you is a good thing. And when leaders understand that that's their servant leaders, that's their role, right? They're coaches and servant leaders. Then organizations run better, departments run better, groups run better. It's a common thread that I witnessed over many years.
And it sounds like, Noel, you had fun and were really passionate about what you were doing. And because I don't get a sense in any of your stories that you were, often leadership can be it can be tough. It can be stressful. There's a lot of maybe overwhelm that leaders face into uncertainty. But I get a sense that your approach made you really resilient to some of those things. Is that right?
The hardest decision I ever made was retiring. It was. My wife will tell you that. My wife for 35 years and my 2 sons. I have 30 and 32, and they're great. I've been very blessed and fortunate with the family I have and a lot of support from them. But that was the most difficult decision because I enjoyed what I was doing. Right? And I did from the time I started back in my 20s. Just know that. Is that I had hard days, tough days, long days, but I never had a bad day. I never had a day I didn't want to be doing what I was doing. It's like I told my sons when they were choosing careers, here's what you need to major in, whatever it is you love, okay? Because you need to wake up in the morning and want to go. You need to wake up in the morning and I said, I don't care if you make chairs for a living. If you love making chairs, then be the best chair maker in the world because do it, but love what you do.
Yeah.
Right? Pick something that fits your personality, whatever that happens to be, and you'll be better served for it when it's all said and done. But work matters. Producing something in a community is important, right? So just to be clear, that I did reinforce the responsibilities they had to wherever it is they were going to be, not just to work, but to invest in wherever they live. I heard a quote early in my life, again, that was left by the founder of UPS, James E. Casey. And it's a truism, no matter what activity you're talking about. And my sons would reinforce this. And when I said it to them when they were 9 and 10, you can't hope to get more than you give. And I'm going to let that settle for a minute. People always want more than they're putting into something, but you can't hope to get more than you give. It's not going to happen. And I could say, it's funny how people think about investing.
Yes.
Well, I don't have enough for retirement. And I go, well, did you save? Did you have a plan? I mean, every dollar you made, did you put a dime away for later? No. Okay, then why would you have, if you don't invest, why would you have something? Same thing happens with people. If you don't invest in your people, why would they invest in you? No, I mean, really, it doesn't make any sense. If you don't invest in your people, and I mean truly invest in them.
Yeah.
Truly spend time. I work with 2 business owners that built a beautiful company in Cincinnati. And they were 2 young guys in their 40s. And they were going through a lot of turmoil about 3 years ago. And we just happened to meet through the person who was my book editor coach. And they're like, man, we really need some leadership training and development. And the first thing I said to Josh and Bob, okay, write down on the tablet how much you've invested in your 60 people.
Right.
Tangibly. I want to know what you've done to say, I'm going to help them be better at blah. I don't care if it was eating ice cream. Write it down. Well, they couldn't. I said, there you have it. Why would you be better? And so for about a year, this is what they heard from me all the time. Executive CEO coaching, right? It was like once a month, I'd go visit, blah, blah, blah. We should have a conversation, make things doable, small bites. Okay, this month, let's think about this. Okay, and they have tripled the size of their company because their employees tripled the size of their company.
Yes.
Because they started to sit down and really take time to say, okay, Sue, okay, how'd you do? Where can I help you? Let's talk about where you think I can be better for you. Right. And that's where a small thing like this comes up. And I also have a chapter on this, and it's called listening. Is listening a skill or a value? I want the reader to think about that. I want the business owner to think about that. Is listening a skill or is it a value? And the truth of the matter is it's both, because we don't listen to people we don't value, right? And as an owner, you need to value every single person that's in your organization. So what does that mean? You need to listen to them. And when they come to talk to you, I use a method called stop, pause, and listen. And when someone would say, hey, no, you have a minute, I would say to myself, stop,
Yes.
pause, and listen. Put the phone down, look the person directly in the eye and say, hey, what do you want to talk about? How can I help you? Because you'll never know. It could be 100 times. You'll never know when that one time was a critical moment. You'll never know when that one time was a critical moment. So stop, pause, and listen. So I work with Bob and Josh on these very things that we've been talking about. And they've had tremendous success because now they're investing in their people, right? In ways that were very different. And they were successful when I met them. It's just that now they're more successful.
Yes. Absolutely. Noel, you are singing from my hymn book. I agree with everything, and particularly with my background in organizational psychology, I see a lot of leaders not paying enough attention, not putting enough development work in themselves and in others. So thank you so much. It's a breath of fresh air to talk to you, Noel. We will put your link to the book as well as the masterclasses. I'll put those in the show notes for people. Where else can people reach you, just so that we've got a direct line to you, because you've got such a wealth of wisdom?
The easiest way is my name, newlypromoted.com. There's a way to reach me that way, and I'm on LinkedIn, and so I get a lot of traffic there from individuals through LinkedIn. But the easiest way is newlypromoted.com or LinkedIn. On my website, when you go to newlypromoted.com, you'll see the masterclass content. You can buy the book on Barnes & Noble or Amazon, right? in the master class, you can purchase it. And my assistant, Kayla Bozeman, KaylaBozman at Gmail, can help with any part of facilitation on a masterclass, live webinars. So if you want a 2-hour session to just talk to your frontline leaders, right? We go through the masterclass live and in living color with them, etc. And so that's all available there. And, the cost is negotiable, of course, but that's how they can reach me through there. And I'm also on Instagram, of course.
Thank you so much, Noel. I really appreciate that. We'll make sure that all of those are in the show notes as well. Shout out to Kayla, because I'm sure that having Kayla's help means a lot as well. I think that we don't shout out our people who help us all the time. So, to be spirit of the conversation today. Thank you so much, Noel. It's been an absolute pleasure. And I know that there's so many nuggets and takeaways from this conversation, but definitely go read the book. It's going to be a real game changer for your front line. So thank you so much, Noel.
Well, it's been my absolute pleasure to be on Team Culture and You with you, Josephine. I enjoyed it tremendously, and I hope that your listeners get, if just to get one thing of value, then it was definitely worth the time.